This week, we have a little bit of time left in Tiwaz here, and we will be in Tiwaz until the 14th, at which point we move into Berkana, where we will stay until the 30th of March. Tiwaz, this runic cycle, has made it evident that sacrifice is part of life, that grief is part of life. They are not just things that happen, they are not things that occur in our lives by some accident or some abruption of sacred order. They are part of sacred order, at least for being in form. That's part of the acceptance that we make when we come here. And I think that's challenging to sit with because, at least in American settler culture, our privilege affords us the perspective that sacrifice should be avoidable if you're doing things right, if you're living right, that sacrifice is what happens when you have less privilege. And there may definitely be some truth to that last part, that sacrifice is um, something that people who are more privileged can dodge more successfully in this culture. But what we've learned through Tiwaz in this runic cycle is that is a lie. Sacrifice is always part of being in form. Form itself is a sacrifice. Form is borrowed. And maybe that is the ultimate sacrifice, that for a little while, we get to borrow from the elements and the space here to be informed, to have this body, and we get to have the life that is laid out, that we choose, some combination of weird and orlog, and then we give it all back. That seems to be the focus of Tiwaz this time, to pay really close attention to what we're doing with our weird and orlog, to understand that the parts of it that are not working successfully or in support of us the way that we feel we need them to, those are places where sacrifice is asking to be made. And they are places where we have to accept that grief is part of that. Tiwaz is the first rune in the third et, and it's a tremendous speed bump as we come in. But of course, the movement into Berkana gives it a little bit of support and a whole lot of witnessing. I'm going to go ahead and talk now about Ansuz as the how we can Tiwaz best for these last few days we have with it this week. Ansuz is the rune of soothsaying, not fortune telling, but sooth means truth. So, truth saying. It means be impeccable with your word. And that implies that we have the internal processes in place to know what our truth is. And then we bring it to the world. And that's ultimately what I think the memo of Ansuz is. We have a truth. We have part of the universal, pluriversal life force flowing through us in this unique combination. And that is what we bring to the planet. And so I think breath gets overly emphasized sometimes. Like, yes, that's what it means, and in terms of like the word, but the underlying meaning of it is life force. And for us, our life force is on our breath, and every exhalation that we have is producing something in the world. Something is being built by our breath. And if we apply our truth to that, if we understand that with every breath we take, with every truth we hold and give out to the world, something else is being built with that. Ansuz reversed doesn't necessarily mean that the truth isn't being told, whether it's by you or you perceiving the truth from someone else. It can mean that it's harder to discern. It's not clear. There's something occluding it so much that you're not really sure, or you can't glean from it what you need to. The truth is evident, but you're not sure how it pertains to you. So there's some confusion floating around with Ansuz reversed with Tiwaz. There's some confusion around understanding maybe what sacrifice is before us, or we understand clearly what sacrifice is before us, but we don't necessarily know how to reshape our truth in light of that sacrifice. I would imagine sacrifice changes our identity, right? If it's a personal sacrifice, we know there's something that we just can't keep doing this way. We can't behave this way. We can't stay in this relationship grouping anymore. And yet, to divest from it would mean changing our identity in some way, which means the way we look at our truth changes also. And that is a genuine space for crisis to occur. Lucky for us, Berkana or Berkano has the medicine for that. I think it's so wonderful that Berkana follows Tiwaz. It almost seems like somebody thought that through. So, where Tiwaz is this rune of mid battle, we have to change tactics, which is incredibly excruciating to do, despite the fact that we know victory is at hand either way. We change tactics. It's still a battle. We win the battle, and we still have to recover. We still have to come back to who we are after this sacrifice has been made and understand how our truth is shaped for the world because of that or in spite of that. Berkana is the rune of rest, but specifically tended rest. A lot of people associate Berkana with midwifery, this state of being rehabilitated and cared for by someone else. Someone is looking after you. Someone is giving you, I like to say, the chaise lounge treatment. You're having this spa moment to literally sit back, process, have somebody bring you soup when you need soup, and get yourself together after having gone through incredible tribulation. What would life be like if we had that opportunity to not just acknowledge that tribulation happened and we're changed from it, but to actually be taken care of and facilitate the processing of who you are and what your truth is after that experience before you have to return back to everyday life, the rest of the world, work, paying the bills? What in the world would life be like if we had that? And Berkana, in a lot of ways, is, I think, an insertion point in the runes saying we have to make room for that. At least in the version of culture that we are in, it is not going to just up and happen. It's not going to be made for us. So we have to sort of insert that for ourselves. Berkana is the point that we realize something really significant has been done, achieved, dues paid in our lives. And it's realizing that that has happened, which, like I say that, the words sound easy. Just realize that your dues have been paid. But just like there's a whole process in Ansuz inherently that is understanding what your truth is before you speak or bring or express your truth to the world, I feel like there are processes similar backing up Berkana that are to understand what you're really rehabilitating, to understand who you are coming out at the other end of this experience. You have to take time to do that. You have to be willing to sift through parts of you who don't support the changed you, who don't support the new truth. And you have to give the ones who do support your new truth a little bit more time on the mic. And that might not be so easy to do. In fact, there's the processing of the ordeal that has happened with Tiwaz, and then there's the processing of who you now are as a result of that ordeal. We don't get the opportunity to have that kind of introspection and space made for change in this culture. Ansuz reversed suggests that something is disrupting our awareness of what our rehabilitation is, can, or should look like. And it's probably likely, knowing the collective, disrupting us from being able to even have the rehabilitation that we need. And again, just like with all of the runes in season, it doesn't necessarily mean we are experiencing this thing at this time. It's a reminder to beef up our skills around that thing. And so Berkana is a reminder to build in this time and space to process things where we need to. Not just time and space, but the rituals. Have functional, strong rituals that work for you to be able to process hard things. I think it's also very possible that during this time with Berkana, Ansuz reversed is saying there may be forces who don't want you to have the time that you need, the rituals in place to be able to sort of reboot yourself. And or there may be forces in place who try to convolute that. They just make it harder for you to do, harder for you to get to the bones of your truth now and how you bring it to the world in this changed place from a changed you. And I think it's also very likely to represent an inflection of distrusting who you become as a result of the sacrifice you have made and as a result of the processing that you do around that, which means a distrust of your own truth. I think that is an incredibly viable possibility at a collective level. The direction that we're working with in this transition from Tiwaz to Berkana is again within. I know we talk in depth about what within is. We did it last week, and we have many times, and it does indicate these inner earth spaces, these cavernous spaces that are dark recesses, and they hold truths about us, these inner recesses of ourselves. And I feel like that is what within is really pointing us to. So when I asked what direction wanted to be in the runecast this week, it wasn't like a super hell yes for within. It was actually more like an absolutely don't stretch out into other directions. Keep it close, keep it home. And I thought that was interesting, even giving the cardinal directions, because we have to have a certain mastery in relationship with the cardinal directions before we get to the beyond directions. And within seemed like the one that was closest to what we're being asked to do, which is kind of clean house and do inventory, know who's in there, know what their relationship is, know what gifts they bring. Likewise, know who's in there to understand what limitations they bring and quite possibly what absences are within that some power needs to be returned to. The element that we're working with this week is plastic. Little people dog, lots of faces in the runecast. Plastic gets a rise out of a lot of people as an element because some people feel like elements are pure, they are pristine, and they are original. And I do understand that there's a distinction to be made with plastic in particular. And yet, it spoke to me in such a way years ago that I understood humans have left a mark with plastic that isn't just a product of elemental process, it has changed elemental process, and its presence continues to change it. And that was when I was like, okay, I have to acknowledge this somewhere in my ritualistic practices. Plastic is the element that represents the absolute best of humanity and the absolute worst of humanity. And it also reminds us that while it causes tremendous problems on the planet, It solves problems that other things haven't been able to. I think plastic, it represents us, I think, to a fault. It's a reminder that we have to hold our agency really carefully because what comes out of it goes on to live its own life forever. I think that is the key reminder that plastic is giving us about sacrifice and how we carry what we take forward from sacrifice as our truth. Sit with it, understand it, be in relationship with what that is at a deeply intimate level, because the vulnerability that it produces in our lives as we go forward and share it stays in the world forever. The wisdom of it stays in the world forever. The season that we're working with is autumn, which I believe also is the season that we worked with last week. Autumn is it's busy but not hurried. There's a sense of autumn that is about taking your time and enjoying the spoils of harvest, but at the same time having this just little tinge of urgency to make sure you're putting back what you need to for the winter that's coming. And it's also the point that we're sort of tucking in our relationship with the outdoors. We know that as winter sets in, we're not going to be able to be outdoors in quite the way that we are in warmer or more comfortable weather. We're literally tucking in how we're in relationship with our ecosystem and quite possibly helping our ecosystem to get tucked in. I think the memo with Autumn regarding Tiwaz and Berkana is to be really careful and thoughtful about how we hold them, how we explore the way that we're in relationship with them, and yet understand that we do need to draw some conclusions. It can't just be this continuously nebulous exploration that we don't really know, it's not settling into a truth. Like, of course, that takes some time and some examination. But the memo with autumn is we need to have preparation. We need to have a direction. We need to understand where we're going because winter is coming and we won't be able to take that kind of time and thoughtfulness in winter. We have to have that done before whatever the need is that this truth is supporting or is supporting us to be able to meet. That process has to happen first. The earthly helping spirit that we're working with this week is petrified wood, so tree in some capacity. And the thing that I always think of first with tree is memory, which is this sustained power over time, this stance of being witness. And roots, that's the next thing that I think of. Tree is always represented to me as this witness that occupies a space in ecosystem. It gives off things that the ecosystem needs. It takes up things that it needs from the ecosystem. And it always holds this witnessing space. And when we think of the quintessential tree as Yggdrasil, world tree, this witness who is planted, that is literally the transportation and the connector to other realms, it draws on every possible support for our every level of being. And we have access to it 24/7. I think of tree as quite potentially our strongest ancestor and our most capable ally for how we move among informed being. I think it's worth exploring the places where you bear witness and to really sit with how memory is in relationship with the version of you that needs to come forward through sacrifice and through the processing. How is your memory in relationship with that? Is it helpful? Does it hold it back? Is it facilitating? And how can you be in relationship with memory and have roots for who you are now? I don't think that has to be in contradiction to each other. I think overall, this runecast is asking us to be really clear in what we're bringing to the planet right now. And yet, it's not asking us to dial it in that specifically just yet. It's asking us to be very clear in what we need to sacrifice to be that version of us, to bring what we need to the planet. And it's asking us to make sure that we sit with and give ourselves all the resources that we need to make that happen. And even as I say that, I find myself thinking, well, but there's only so much time, there's only so much energy. How's that going to work? But the overall tone of this runecast is that it does work. Even with Ansuz reversed, there's an incredibly optimistic feel to this runecast that says we do come through this sacrifice with the version of us in place that carries our truth forward. We do somehow manifest the processing time to give that version of us the reinforcements that they need. The Galder that we're working with this week is Tiwaz, Tiwa, Tir, Berkana or Berkano, Beork, Bear, Beor, Berka, Barkan, Bar, and Ansuz. Ansu, Aun, Aunsu, Os. When we work with 3 runes, we're really looking at a split in the week. We're working with Tiwaz and Ansuz or Berkana and Ansuz. If you say them all 3 in the same Galder, that's not this runecast. You're doing somebody else's runecast. It is always worth saying that the way that you Galder the runes is the way that you feel them resonant in your body. You can emphasize pronunciation, that's on you. Do it the way you need to do it. What you're going for is feeling the resonance in your body. This is how this Galder came together for me. Tiwa Ansu, 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 Tiwa Ansu. The cadence of this Galder started out a little bit uncommon for me. I'm always tending toward even, smooth, if not like lilting cadence. And it didn't start out that way, but somehow partway through working with it, it got there. And that felt appropriate. It felt like processing something. It felt like the version of me that started this Galder is not the version of me that finished it. I'm going to sit with that a little bit. I would love to hear how you're weathering life at this time, how the Runecast speaks to you, and thank you for all that you do.